We're here today with Dr. Gilly Khan, a psychologist, a mother, a writer, and ADHD expert. We'd love to talk with you about your experience with ADHD in girls and our mission, which is to diagnose girls as early as possible who have ADHD. Thank you and welcome. What got you interested in the subject of ADHD in the first place?
Catherine, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's such an honor to be here. And I'm proud to be representing this amazing group of women. I have ADHD. I was diagnosed in adulthood, along with so many other women who are recently being diagnosed. People are learning more about how ADHD uniquely presents, not only in girls, but also in women. I began being interested more in neurodiversity generally. I started working in a school for autistic kids.
You were doing this before you were diagnosed? Because I'm really interested in knowing how old you were and what led
Mhm.
to your particular
Yeah.
diagnosis.
Yeah. So I was 33. I'm 35 now when I was diagnosed with ADHD, but I suspected that I had ADHD for many years. I just never went out and got diagnosed. And just like other women, I was diagnosed with depression first. If I were to guess, I would say it's probably persistent depressive disorder or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's definitely hormonal because I have other conditions. I'm sharing this not because I overshare, but because it's all relevant to
Okay.
ADHD diagnosis.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, hormonal issues and migraine attacks, all of that has to do with estrogen.
Now, I'm
So
doing research about that. You were already
yeah,
interested in psychology and neurodiversity before you found out that you had ADHD. So it was really the depression that led you to think that you might have something underlying it, or were there symptoms of ADHD?
there were symptoms of ADHD. I call them the more prototypical or stereotypical symptoms, the ones that are well known, that are part of the criteria, that are observable. I definitely presented with those, but it was harder to detect in girls because girls can be successful and also present with those symptoms, especially people who are bright. They're able to cover up their symptoms.
But did you have a hard time in grade school that you can remember?
I think it was more on the emotional dysregulation side of things.
Oh,
And that's why my book is about that.
okay.
Um,
I want to ask you
it-
about your book. It sounds really fascinating. Yeah.
yeah.
Let's just plunge into that. It's a novel, right? What's the title?
Oh, yeah. Allow me to interrupt.
I love it. But it's a novel, huh? Is that, or is it a memoir? How would you describe it?
It's like a hybrid. It's a memoir. The genre is psychology slash memoir slash self-help.
Okay, that's good. But
Yeah.
and yet you describe it as a novel. Why? Are there fictionalized elements to it?
No, there are no fictionalized elements to it. I guess maybe I called it a novel because it reads like a story. I studied creative writing in college.
Yes.
And so I want my work to be something you feel like you don't want to put down.
Right. Especially for
So
people with short attention spans, right? You have to consider your audience.
yeah, I love Sophie Kinsella, and she's the fiction author. One thing she has said is, you want to write the book that you would want to pick up and read.
And so you describe it as revealing the emotional truth of women with ADHD, right? So I wanted to ask you, what's your idea? What is that emotional truth?
Yeah, so the book is a lot about rejection sensitivity dysphoria. That kind of takes the limelight because it's a concept that has not been given enough research attention. Bill Dodson, he's the psychiatrist who popularized RSD. He's not the one who initially came up with the term, but he's the one who started writing about it in articles and blog posts. It really resonated with someone, and they posted his article and it just went viral.
Huh.
And that's how the word got out on RSD. And so now it's like a catch 22 because researchers say there isn't any research on it now. But the reason there isn't any research on it is because I can't get my foot in the door and conduct research on it. So then the question is, well, how do you treat it? And it just becomes even though it's not really anecdotal, because when you have all of these people responding to an article and saying, yes, I have this, or Yes, for me too, like for the introduction, the very first opening to my book, I decided what to do for that. And I just thought, I'm writing for women, but here's an opportunity for me to ask women about their experiences. I got off social media for 7 years and was totally happy living under a rock. But I also love writing, and to be in the publishing world, you have to be on social media. I got back on social media and developed a nice little following of women with ADHD. I put a shout out on my Instagram page and said, if you want your story to be anonymously in my book,
Nice.
please let me know. I'll send you a set of questions. And there's so many women. One of the questions was, has emotional dysregulation been a part of the puzzle for you in understanding your ADHD symptoms, or has it significantly affected you? And do you think it's related to ADHD for you? People said when they first learned that there was even a connection, especially for RSD, it brought them to tears, like a bunch of women.
So interesting. When you talk about the emotional truth of women with ADHD, would that truth be that women with ADHD are more prone to emotional dysregulation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. It's not part of the criteria. And I think that it's not only for women, it should be part of the criteria because emotional dysregulation has been described as part of ADHD as early as the 1800s. The fact that it's not even included in the criteria is a little bit shocking, but I think especially for women when you really think about the science and the biology.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for you as a girl? You say you had emotional issues as a girl, and that was the manifestation of your ADHD back then. What was that like?
So for me, I was emotional. I think I was, there are a few different sides to it because a lot of people confuse or they'll say, what if it's just depression? Or what if it's disruptive mood dysregulation disorder? Or what if this is just acting out like oppositional defiant disorder? And how do you tease those apart from emotional dysregulation that is ADHD? And the way I make sense of it is that it's across a broad spectrum of emotions. When we're excited, we're really excited. And when we are sad, we can be really sad. And it can take us time to recover from that sadness. And the smallest trigger could set us off. It's this quick escalation into whatever feeling you're experiencing. And then it takes time to come down from that. There's an adjustment period. And I think a lot of people in relationships with people with ADHD get confused because they want to fix the problem, but that it doesn't work that way because we are in the zone of whatever emotion wave we're riding.
Yeah.
And it takes time to move on. And the best solution is really, it depends, of course, for every person, but the best solution usually is to take time to yourself. The way I like to think about it too is I noticed a theme with neurodivergent preteen girls that I've worked with. This might sound odd, but I don't know if this is something you've noticed too or thought about. But a lot of the girls I've worked with say that they feel really safe under a table.
I gotta try that.
Yeah. Like when they feel overwhelmed, they crawl under. And it was something the parents would describe to me as bizarre. They would say, she gets overwhelmed and then she crawls under the coffee table.
The common thread. That's fascinating, huh? Can you tell me a little bit more about personally what it was like? Do you think that somebody should have supported you better when you were having these issues as a kid, when your ADHD was surfacing in terms of feeling these emotions so strongly?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think I would have benefited from medication. But then aside from that, everyone's story is different. I didn't have therapy. As a kid, I come from a single parent household. My mom passed away when I was 4.
Oh no.
Yeah, so like my dad raised me, and my dad was an immigrant, and he comes from a low socioeconomic background. And so he didn't really believe in psychology. In fact, he used to say psychologists were pointless.
You sure showed him, huh, with your career choice.
Exactly. Now he has to accept it.
Do you have more open conversations now about what was going on with you back then?
Yeah, now he's supportive and he's very proud. I think it was a generational thing too. A lot of adults in my generation can probably relate, especially immigrants.
Where did you immigrate from?
So I didn't immigrate. I was born in the United States, but my parents are from Israel. They met in the Israeli military, but my dad really had nothing. Everything was taken away from my dad's family during the Holocaust. They have a wealthy background, but then they lost everything. He basically lived out of his car when he moved to Florida and built himself up from nothing. And then he moved my mom to Florida, and me and my brother were both born in Miami. My mom was diagnosed with this very aggressive form of breast cancer soon before we were planning to move to Israel. So we had an apartment picked out, I had the room, and it was the day before they were going to travel just to take care of the move. She got her diagnosis and everything changed.
Wow. I have a very good friend in Israel, Yudis Manor, who studies trauma and ADHD. She's about to give a presentation at a conference I'm going to, and she is going to point out the incredible overlap of symptoms between trauma and ADHD. You obviously had some trauma in your background. Do you ever think how much was that experience and how much was the ADHD and what was the relationship?
Yes, there's a chapter on it in my book.
What do you think is the answer then to fix the underlying ADHD or to work on the underlying ADHD to help with all the other problems?
I think they go hand in hand and it's complex. Trauma doesn't create ADHD. If you have PTSD or trauma or stressor related disorder, it has its own set of symptoms. Yeah, there are similarities in brain function for people who experience trauma, who struggle with a trauma related disorder and with ADHD, but they're not exactly the same. And if my mom didn't pass away, I would still be the same
Hmm.
person. I may not be doing the same things that I'm doing, maybe not the psychology piece, but it's almost like when you have ADHD, it boils down even to your core, your personality. There's a certain personality flair that you get from people who are neurodivergent. There's a reason we get each other.
Wild enthusiasms, sensitivities, all that stuff, right? But what
Exactly.
you were 30, okay, so you're 35 now, you said, and it was
Mhm.
2 years ago that you finally got your diagnosis. And what was the precipitating event? Why did you finally get it?
Yeah. So my daughter is now 7. It's perfect. I used as a checklist with her. But since she was two, obviously is too young, but my husband and I would make comments like, this child has ADHD. And he used to joke, I wonder where she gets it from. He really didn't believe me
Oh,
when I said, I think I have ADHD. I've said it since I was 18, since taking a psychology course. I would say I really think I have ADHD because it was hard for me to fall asleep at night. I was constantly thinking, my brain was always on. I felt antsy. Like I had to move around when I was doing homework. I would have my textbook open on the bed and then it would stay open and no one could touch it because I'm not done yet. And then I would do something else and then come back. It would just stay open because I did not have the energy or the motivation to read it, but no one could touch it because if they did, that would completely scramble my brain.
so your daughter was diagnosed first, and then you
Yeah.
were? Okay.
And she doesn't have an official diagnosis yet.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what the deal is with that. But basically, for years, we said, I think she has it. I believe that she has it. I almost don't even need someone to tell me that she does. But I had taken her when she turned 6 because in my mind, I was like, I did a lot of testing in my history as a psychologist. And I know that before the age of 6, it's very hard to get an ADHD diagnosis, especially for a girl. So I thought if I want to start thinking about this and even considering medication, let me talk to her pediatrician. That's the first person naturally that a parent wants to talk to. And I love my pediatrician and he's wonderful, but he's a pediatrician. And most pediatricians don't know very much about ADHD. There's research on this, especially ADHD in girls. So I asked him, I specialize in ADHD. I really think my daughter has ADHD and I want to talk about starting medication. He said, how's she doing at school? I said, she's doing fine, but I picked a school that is low demand and she's 6. So the demands are low. But at home, my husband and I are both like for years, we've been saying she struggles with emotional dysregulation. She is a blabbermouth. She constantly needs attention. I started listing off some examples of symptoms. And basically, I got the vibe that he didn't believe me. And it was just discouraging. And I left feeling really awful. And
Mm.
that's how I left when I sought out my diagnosis, because the first comment I got when I said, hey, I think I have ADHD
Who did
was, well,
you go
that's
to? Who did?
a psychiatrist.
Okay.
Yeah, I went directly to a psychiatrist. I found a psychiatrist. The first one was not so good. And then I switched and I found one who I'm still seeing. The first thing the psychiatrist said to me was, that's interesting because somehow you got a PhD.
I've gotten that a lot, that kind of comment too. And they were being sarcastic. Of course, you don't have ADHD because you function well in the world.
Yeah.
And
Or
so
like suspicious. It's just,
how did you actually persist and get your diagnosis?
I was annoying during the same sitting. I said, yes, I have a PhD, but I don't sleep at night. I struggle with concentrating. I told him about how things were when I was a kid. I said, I work with these people in therapy and I give them a lot of the advice of the things that have helped me. Eventually, he was like, okay, yeah, let's try it if you say so. And it has helped me.
Yeah,
But
medication.
medication,
So tell me again the link between your daughter seeming to have these symptoms and you finally getting your diagnosis after all these years. Was it that she inspired as you saw she was suffering or having problems? What?
yes.
Yeah.
So I saw it in her, and then it made me more confident that this is really what I was struggling with. And even with treating the depression, still something was off. You just know. I was like, enough already.
So
I'm going to go help myself.
what difference has this made concretely in your life to know that you have ADHD and to take treatment, take medication for it?
So the medication has been really helpful. Obviously, stigma. I'm a psychologist. A lot of people will hold psychologists at a higher bar. They
It's
need to
mentally
be mentally
health. Yeah,
healthy
right.
to help me, or employers might see it that way, and that scared me. I'm very open about it now, and I have to be with my book.
So you really just embraced it rather than hide from it.
I
But
had to.
the stigma probably caused you to delay seeking help for yourself for all those years.
Yes, but I was working with someone open about her ADHD, and she was such a role model to me.
That's great.
And I thought, if she can do it, I'll do it.
How would your life have been different had you been diagnosed at age 8 or 10?
The medication would have helped me get my work done without having to take twice as long as my peers. I used to have a joke with one of my friends. I used to study for weeks for a test and come out with a 93. And she would be like, hey, Gilly, what'd you get? And I would say 93. And she'd be like, oh, I got a 98 and I studied for a day.
It's not fair. Life would have been easier for you. You wouldn't have had to have worked so hard.
Yeah, this is also in retrospect, and my memory is not great. But I think it would have helped me with my schoolwork. The other thing is, I really struggled on standardized tests. I think if I had gotten accommodations, like extended time, that would have helped me tremendously. I hate standardized tests. I think they're so unfair because I had basically a 4.0 GPA in college, and the standardized tests like the ACT, SAT, the GRE, that is what stood in my way to, I think, progressing into programs that I really wanted. And it really didn't feel fair. I had to take it 6 times.
Has the medication helped with the emotional dysregulation? Do you think it's had an effect there?
Okay, so I take Focalin for the core ADHD symptoms, paying attention, sitting still, and not feeling like there are like bugs crawling under my skin when I'm trying to read a book. And guanfacine for the emotional dysregulation piece. And that has helped me. Nothing is a full fix. It's medications are not like magical solutions that are going to get rid of all your problems, but there is a difference I've noticed. I am very sensitive to criticism. And in my book, I write stories about how much it affected me whenever I felt rejected or was actually rejected, because girls with ADHD do get rejected.
And
But
how did it affect you? Can you tell us what's in your book?
sure. So I told you there was the role model who I was working with. Before her, there was someone else who was my mentor in this role. And she was so amazing to me. She would forward me emails that clients wrote that were very sweet, like compliments. And that really helps people with ADHD. Just like rejection negatively affects us very intensely, praise affects us equally in the positive direction.
Sure.
And those little acts were what kept me going, what motivated me. After about a year of working there, she was making a switch to a different workplace. I did not expect that to affect me in the way that it did. So it wasn't necessarily rejection, it was more like the anticipation of, oh shit, like now she's leaving and I won't have that. And I was sobbing,
It sounds like
sobbing.
a huge loss. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
but she wasn't. And I remember my in-laws were visiting and they were downstairs, and my husband opens the door and he sees me sitting in the room like frail and pre-medication, pre-guanfacine to be specific. And that's actually the medication that Dr. Dawson writes a lot about
Interesting.
related to RSD. And that is,
I was really wondering if you had to test different medications before you found that. Yeah.
yeah. So he talks about alpha agonists like clonidine or guanfacine to specifically help with that. And then it's how do we know it's helping with that? We need to do research on it, but it's from large groups of clients that he's seen. And actually, I've recommended it now to my clients, and they say the same thing that I've said.
Yeah.
And I haven't even shared my experience with it. I'll just say, hey, why don't you ask your psychiatrist about this? And the mom will come in, and I promise this is the way she'll say it by herself. She'll say, oh, her concentration is better. I've seen a little bit of a change in her like homework completion and stuff like that. What I've really been seeing is that things are rolling off her shoulders more. Like she doesn't get so stuck on perceived criticism, or at home, if her dad tells her to do something, it's less of an explosion.
Interesting. Now, Cynthia's going to edit this pretty heavily, which I'm very glad because the two of us are going down lots of different rabbit holes. But I've got 10 minutes left, and I really want to make sure I ask you a couple important questions, which is young girls now with ADHD in your private practice, right? And what do you find that your advice is to them, like your main advice? What's the thing that you're telling them over and over?
When you say young girls, the age matters, right? So most of my clients with ADHD are middle school or high school girls. I have had younger girls, but we know that they're not frequently diagnosed below the age of 12, 11.
Wasn't happening.
That's the reason for the work that you guys are doing.
But
But my main message to them is it's a similar experience to what I had with getting my diagnosis. Once you get it and you're open about it, if you want to be, and you embrace it, then your life makes pretty much a complete 180. You just feel happier. You get the help that you need. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. I know people talk about how ADHD shouldn't be described as a superpower, but honestly, if people think it's a superpower and that strengthens them or empowers them, fine. There's such a thing as self-fulfilling prophecies.
But all the things that we've been discussing, the sensitivity to rejection and the mood fluctuations, that also has to be managed. So I'm wondering if beyond medication, what kind of advice you find yourself giving the girls that you see, beyond that advice to embrace it and understand it and learn about it.
Be kind to yourself. All of these things are problems. Nothing amazing ever comes with no shortcomings. Even if you're a superhero, there's always a weakness. Savants could be experts at something, but your brain can't accommodate everything. You're going to struggle with social skills. There needs to be flexibility. If you're really good at one thing, it doesn't mean you could be good at everything.
And for you, besides medication, are there things that have really made a huge difference in your life since you were diagnosed? Like ways that you're taking care of yourself in addition to being kind to yourself?
This is also a big part of my book, following your passion, because I think people who, especially women with ADHD, we're very passionate, we're very driven. And one woman who wrote a description to me said that when given the right supports, women with ADHD could truly rule the world. We could do amazing things if we feel supported and we feel like we're in an environment that helps us.
What are you doing? You think your daughter has ADHD, but are you waiting until she's older to get the diagnosis, or what's your plan there?
It's something my husband and I have been talking about. I'm a psychologist and he's not. And so he has more of the general public's understanding of stimulant medication. And that's how it is. In a marriage,
In other words,
basically, you
he's
are.
resistant. Yeah.
Yeah. So is it bad for her to start medication this early? I've told him there's research that shows that when you start with stimulant medication early, it can actually help with brain development in the parts of your brain, or with accommodating for the weaknesses in an ADHD brain through neuropromotion. But of course, no study is perfect. Things can change for every kid. It's going to be different. There's no way to prove this is going to be true for her.
How old did you say she's 6? Do you think that you'll reach an agreement anytime soon, or what would have to happen so that you could be together?
Right now, it's more about how she's doing in life. That's the most important thing for anyone who comes to me for therapy, where they're just like, should I consider medication for my child? I ask them what's their functioning like and how much are the symptoms interfering
Do they
with their,
do they have friends? I think is a big
yeah.
question. Yeah.
So my daughter does have friends. She's friendly and has a good support system. She's in the right kind of school for her. I think if we needed accommodations, we would get them. It's a private school. So that matters in terms of deciding with the testing, because it's not cheap. She is slow with completing her schoolwork, but the demands are not so high right now. Academically, we're not in a hurry, but it's something that we've talked about.
You're keeping a close eye on it. It sounds like I've talked to one researcher who said if the schools were okay, we wouldn't need medication for kids, which I agree with, because in some schools, kids are out of their seat. They're working on projects, they're emotionally involved, right? Which is the opposite of the kinds of schools that maybe you and I went to and my kids went to. It's just been so interesting to talk with you. I think I have to wrap it up now, but I'll be in touch on email, and Cynthia will too. I'm going to get your book, and it's really interesting, everything you have to say. Do you want to,
Thank you.
anything that I didn't ask that I should have, that you want to leave us with?
Is
Covered
that
it
a
all?
biography about Walt Disney behind you?
This is actually my husband's bookshelf, so it's all history, and I wouldn't be surprised if it were. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'll be in touch. Really appreciate. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.findtheadhdgirls.org. Thank you.